It's 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and Jim just hit his number. $3.2 million, top 5% of households in the country. This is supposed to be the payoff, the moment he's been working toward for the last 30 years. Instead, he's sitting there trying to plan the trip he's dreamed about for 20 years, a week in Zermatt, deep in the Swiss Alps, and realizing he actually can't go. His back can't handle more than 2 hours in a plane seat. His blood pressure is too high for his doctor to clear him for altitude. He's tried to book this trip 3 times over the years and quietly canceled each time, telling himself it was just bad timing. It wasn't bad timing. Here's what actually happened. For 30 years, Jim traded sleep for one more deal, home-cooked meals for whatever was fastest between meetings, workouts for one more hour of research. He could close a $40 million acquisition on 2 hours of sleep. But walking up one flight of stairs left his knees complaining. Jim never thought those two things had anything to do with each other, but they did. So right now, Jim has $3.2 million and nowhere he can actually go with it. Most videos about money focus on protecting your portfolio and growing your investments. Not nearly enough of it is about making sure you're healthy enough to enjoy them. If tonight had gone differently, if it had been his heart instead of his back, none of the $3.2 million would have mattered. His family would have inherited the money. Jim would never have gotten the chance to enjoy it. That's what this video is about, not making more money, but making sure you can enjoy the money you've already earned. What happens when your money keeps growing, but your health keeps declining? Jim didn't do anything unusual to get here. He did exactly what every financial advisor tells you to do. Start early, stay consistent, don't touch it, let it grow. He just spent 30 years pointing that same discipline at his job instead of his health. Every extra hour of work came from somewhere real: sleep, a meal that used to be cooked at home, a Saturday that used to belong to his kids. You already know money grows faster the earlier you start. A dollar invested at 25 is worth a lot more at 65 than a dollar invested at 45 because it had twice as long to grow. Your health works the same way. Skip the gym at 30, and you're not just missing one workout. You're giving up a little bit of the next 30 years. Knees that still work at 60, blood pressure that doesn't need medication, the ability to carry your own luggage at 75. And it's not a small cost. The average couple retiring today at 65 will spend something like $315,000 on healthcare in retirement. That's enough to buy a modest home in some parts of the country, and it all comes from the same retirement account Jim spent 30 years building, the one he hoped would pay for trips to the Alps, not blood pressure medication and physical therapy. A 20-minute walk never feels like it's worth that kind of money. That's the tricky part. Small decisions almost never feel expensive when you're making them, but add them up over 30 years, and suddenly it looks less like exercise and more like paying a little now so you don't pay a lot more later. But there's another part of this that almost nobody thinks about. It's not just whether your health declines, it's when it happens. Losing some mobility at 85 is one thing. Losing it at 65, just as you're finally getting the time to enjoy everything you've spent decades saving for, is something else entirely. Investors already understand this idea. It's called sequence of returns risk. A bad year in the market hurts a lot more if it happens right when you retire and start pulling money out than if that exact same bad year happens 10 years later. The average return over time might be identical. The outcome isn't. Timing changes everything. Health works the same way. Picture two versions of Jim. One retires at 60 with $2 million, still in decent shape. He can travel, chase grandkids around the yard, take up something new. He spends those first 10 years of retirement, the years he's been looking forward to for decades, actually living the life he pictured while he was still working. The other version of Jim retires at 60 with $4 million, double the money, but spent his 50s ignoring his health completely. He spends those same first 10 years in waiting rooms and physical therapy instead of Zermatt. He has twice the money and a tenth of the life. On paper, he did better. In every way that actually matters for how those 10 years feel, he did worse. We run stress tests on our money constantly. What happens if the market drops right when I retire? What happens if inflation stays high for years? Almost nobody runs the same test on themselves. What happens if I can't walk a mile at 70? Nobody plans for that one, and it might be the more important question. Money alone doesn't fix this either, and that's the part that surprises people. I've talked to families who could comfortably afford the retirement they'd always imagined. They could book a trip to Tokyo, stay in a nice hotel, and not worry about the cost. And a lot of them don't do it, not because they're being careful with the money, because the trip itself would wreck them. 14 hours in a seat, a full day of jet lag, a body that can't bounce back from either one anymore. A lot of people are quietly making a deal with themselves. I'll go to Hawaii once I retire. I'll pick up tennis again. I'll learn to sail, and it keeps getting pushed back year after year because there's always one more project at work. The problem is that 65 is just a number on a calendar. What actually decides whether you can take that trip is how old your body is, not how old your ID says you are. Spend your 40s and 50s working through every problem instead of dealing with it, and you can easily show up at 65 with the joints and stamina of someone 15 years older. Jim's $3.2 million will still be there next year. Whether he can sit through a 10-hour flight might not be. Only one of those two things is getting better with time. So what would it have actually taken for Jim to end up in Zermatt instead of at his desk? Probably not much. Not a total life overhaul. Just a few ordinary decisions made a little earlier. Moving 3 hours a week out of a schedule that's currently almost entirely work into actual movement. Walking, lifting something heavy a couple times a week, whatever gets him off the chair, that's it. It wouldn't have cost him much career-wise. Most people who make partner or hit a big title didn't get there because of the 3 extra hours they skipped at the gym, eating actual food instead of whatever's fastest between meetings. Nobody's impressed by this one at a dinner party. It's not exciting, but it's the thing that quietly decides whether you're dealing with a stent at 55 or not. Sleeping instead of working through the night. This is the one people cut first, and it's the one that costs the most. It's when your body actually repairs itself. Inflammation comes down, memory sorts itself out, torn muscle heals. Trading sleep for one more hour of email doesn't save you time, it just moves the cost to later, with interest. And lifting weights, specifically, once you're past 40, not for looks, but because muscle and bone density are what let you get up off the floor, carry your own suitcase, keep up with a grandkid at 75. Skip the gym at 25 and you barely notice. Skip it at 50 and it shows up fast. None of this required Jim to quit his job. It just required him to notice, 10 years earlier, that he was ignoring something that mattered exactly as much as the number on his screen. Here's the actual point of all this. Nobody saves $3.2 million because they want a bigger number. They save it for control over their time, where they live, what they get to do next, and who they get to do it with. But that kind of control takes two things, not one. The money pays for the trip. Your body is what actually gets you on the plane, through the flight, and up the mountain once you land. Jim spent 30 years getting really good at the first one. Nobody ever told him he needed to work on the second one too. So the night he finally hit his number, it didn't feel like the finish line. He had the money to do whatever he wanted, but he was physically too broken to actually do any of it. He doesn't need more money. $3.2 million was never the problem. He needed the version of himself from 10 years ago to go on the 20-minute walk instead of answering one more email. That's when this story was really being written. Not on the night his account crossed $3.2 million, but on ordinary Tuesdays when nobody was paying attention. Every walk he skipped, every meal he rushed through, every night he traded sleep for one more hour of work. Those choices quietly decided what retirement would look like long before he ever got there. A 4% safe withdrawal rate doesn't mean much if you're not around or able to actually take the money out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.